My name's Chris Dunning. I graduated from U of O in 2002 with a degree in accounting. I started my career by going into public accounting right out of college. I did that for about 8 years, and then I left to go work in the energy and utilities industry. I'm currently the Chief Financial Officer at Energy Trust of Oregon, and I've been there for about 3.5 years at this point. The energy and utilities industry wasn't something that was on my mind at all right when I graduated from U of O and went into public accounting. And the great thing, at least for me with public accounting, is that you get assigned to a cross-section of clients in different industries. So I worked in tech and food and manufacturing and other industries like that, but also energy and utilities. So one of the clients that I was assigned to right out of college was the Bonneville Power Administration, which I certainly hadn't heard of when I was at U of O before I was assigned to them as a client. Through working on Bonneville, I came to be really interested in the energy and utilities industry and found it incredibly fascinating because a lot of the things that I cared about as a person, like natural resources and climate change and energy affordability and things like that, all kind of run through the utilities sector and their sort of policy areas and decisions that folks who work in that sector have to wrestle with every day. And I also loved the fact that people I was working with when I was at Bonneville just cared so much about public service. They were really there because they connected to the mission, and that was something, maybe getting back to your question, that I found was really important to me, was having that connection to mission. But I think the thing for me, I suppose, in my career journey was that I both had the opportunity to experience many different sectors and industries because of the job that I had in accounting. And then I was curious, about learning about each of them and trying to find out which of them really meant the most to me. I think this is something that's increasingly important in sort of the post-COVID era when a lot of interactions are now virtual, which means, if you're meeting with folks over Zoom or Teams or whatever, you have to set that up, obviously, as like a meeting. And so interactions can become very transactional. Like, I'm only going to have a Teams meeting with you if I have something I need to get from you or a question I need answered or something like that. And with more of these remote interactions, there's not as many of those like hallway conversations where I'm seeing you in the cafeteria if you're working at a large employer or whatever it is. So you just have to be a lot more intentional about not just interacting with people for transactional purposes, but building in some time to get to know people as people and what they do outside of work and what they care about and that sort of thing. Because in my opinion, that's where kind of relationships are built that are going to last a long time and go beyond just transactional relationships. So if you are in an environment where maybe you're working mostly remote or kind of flexibly, and you're having most of your interactions with folks virtually, what I've done in my working life is making sure to have one-on-one type meetings with most of the people I work with, even outside my finance organization at Energy Trust, just on a regular basis, even if there's not like an agenda, just to keep the lines of communication open. And inevitably, there's always work stuff to talk about, but it's just so important to get to know your peers as people and keep those relationships really vibrant. And I think also, looking beyond your organization, it's really important to me to get to know people that have my same job at like peer not-for-profits, like other people that do what I do, because that's such a great way. Often you're working on similar challenges. They may have ideas to tackle those challenges that you haven't thought of, like best practices and that sort of thing. This new way of working is great. There's a lot of benefits to it, but you have to be a lot more intentional to build real relationships that are beyond just kind of transactional relationships. I was fortunate, one of the first partners at the accounting firm that I went to that I got to work for right out of college. I still remember it. There was an interaction where I was like a brand new staff and he came out to the client that I was on and, met me and, introduced himself and kind of as he was leaving, offered, hey, if you're ever interested in grabbing coffee, that would be great. And, certainly as like a brand new staff to have like a partner offer that to you is a little bit intimidating. It would have been really easy to just sort of not take him up on that and to just let it go by and kind of not put myself out there. But I did take him up on it, and I asked him if we could go grab coffee. And looking back, that was, I feel like that was sort of a pivotal moment because it started a relationship with somebody who was obviously much more senior in his career at that point, but happened to work in the utilities sector that I was so interested in. And that really started, one of the most important coaching and mentoring relationships I have in my professional life that I still have today. Even though I no longer work at the firm, I think every major career sort of question or decision that I've made over these last 20 plus years, he's been a key resource. And I think the important thing when I think about why has he been a good mentor to me is that, he doesn't give me the answers that I want necessarily. It's the answer that I need or the input that I need. And sometimes, his advice or the advice he's given me is not what I'm thinking of doing or the direction I'm thinking of heading, or may not, be consistent with the decision I ultimately make. But it's good and it's challenging input, and it has been consistent through my whole career. That has been really beneficial for me, and I kind of go back again to your prior question about, what makes good relationships, and it's really investing and putting yourself out there sometimes, and just kind of taking him up on that offer for coffee all those years ago, I think was really a pretty pivotal moment, and has just added so much value to my professional life since then. I almost can't overstate how important that is because, I think one of the most important things about working at any organization or being part of any team really is the culture of the team. And I'm a firm believer that the actual culture at an organization is not dictated by what the management of that corporation or organization writes down in their culture statement or their mission statement. Culture is determined by how people behave every day and how they treat each other every day. In reality, if you're not interacting or getting to know people who work at a company, you're not going to get a glimpse of that. It's hard to do anyway in the recruiting process because your interactions are so limited. It's maybe a few kind of mixers and then interviews and stuff like that. But obviously, it's better than nothing. I said that it's really important for me to have a really deep connection to mission wherever I work. That is incredibly important, but working in a culture that I feel comfortable in is equally, if not perhaps more important. You can work at an organization that has a great mission, but perhaps a really suboptimal culture, and that can be a pretty negative experience, working there. I think to your question, I think it's incredibly important to get to know people at the firm that you're interested in joining, so that you can get a sense for that culture and what it's going to be like to work with those folks on a day-to-day basis. We were talking before the interview about when I was here, and the Career Center did a great job of connecting the accounting students to the accounting firms. And we talked about Beta Alpha Xi, for instance. And my recollection is there were so many opportunities where the firms were on campus to just sort of mingle and mix and meet with those folks in a variety of different settings. So I think my recommendation would be just take advantage of as many of those as you can, and see which of these firms resonate with you, the most, and who you could see yourself working with and want to be colleagues with, when you go out into the world. I would think that's probably the best advice I could give is just take advantage of the opportunities that this Career Center offers you because they're really important. Oh, I love that question. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of the accounting profession because it's so, you can really go anywhere with it. It's so portable across, all industries. And I like to think about it as sort of the language of business. And it gives you like a fluency in the financial operations of a business that I'm sure finance majors would say you get in the finance program as well. But I think accounting really immerses you in the financial data, and you can then grow and pivot from there in any number of ways. So for me, I started out in accounting, and my career before I came to Energy Trust kind of led me through the controller accounting officer position into more of a finance-wide position, which meant as I grew through my career, I had to learn things like financial planning and analysis and treasury and stuff like that. But again, accounting just gave me that like literacy in financial data and financial information, the core financial statements that any business would use to present its financial performance and condition that I could use as a jumping off point to build skills in FP&A and treasury. I look at the accounting students that are coming out now, and they're so well versed in, analysis and systems and controls and all of those sorts of things. It's a whole different skill set than when I was coming out, when it was much more kind of debits and credits and, more of the technical side of things. Accounting as a profession has been great to me, and it has really, I think it really set me up for a very enjoyable career, and I would recommend it to anybody. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. And like I said, I think what drew me to it is that, I, like probably many of the students here, are interested in and concerned about things like climate change. And, you look at some of our major sources of emissions here in Oregon, and it's things like, the energy that buildings use and transportation. I mean, those are, probably two of the biggest sectors. And if you want to be part of the solution of tackling climate change and decarbonizing our society, looking at how we produce, transmit, and consume energy in our daily lives is a great place to make a difference. I mentioned working at Bonneville Power, which is where I went after I had worked in public accounting. I felt like being inside a utility like that and working, in kind of a public service respect to safely deliver power to the communities that we served, was super important. And being at a utility, also working towards decarbonization and being mindful of climate change. And then coming over to Energy Trust, and your students may not know a lot about Energy Trust necessarily. We're an independent, not-for-profit here in Oregon that run energy efficiency and small-scale renewable programs for the 5 investor-owned utilities that serve the state of Oregon. But to come to work every day and get to work on helping people save energy, helping people save money on their energy bills, their utility bills, and knowing that is part of the solution to decarbonizing our society, is why I keep coming to work every day and why I was so interested in the energy and utilities sector to start. I would recommend students stay curious and be open to different experiences. If you're fortunate, like I was, to be able to go experience a number of different industries, just learn as much as you can, ask a lot of questions, and you'll be surprised probably where your career takes you. It may not be where you expect. I think I really enjoy when students, because obviously, you haven't had experience in the workplace and things like that. So I like talking about, what is it even like working in the finance function of, a large utility or a, medium-sized not-for-profit? What does your life look like on a daily basis as a CFO? Why were you interested in this sector versus, consumer apparel or whatever, technology, whatever other sector you could have gone into? Because I think those are good questions where I can maybe provide some insight in terms of the choices that I've made as I've gone through my career that might be helpful for you as you're thinking about the choices that lie ahead of you. Certainly not that you would make the same choices, but you can kind of understand how I kind of muddled through them to get to where I am today. Because I can guarantee you won't have the same journey, but it'll be a journey that'll have a number of forks in the road where you're going to have to make some choices. And often there is no right answer, and sometimes the choices can be pretty difficult. Thank you.